Hi and hello, and thank you so much for tuning in. And if you are new, welcome to my channel. My name is Preeti Rao and I am both a real estate and a mortgage broker for close to 20 years. Now, as you are already aware, rents have been increasing big time all over the GTA. And that's kind of great news for landlords, isn't it? But it is actually making it quite painful for some landlords out there. Now, according to the Landlord Tenancy Board, if you own a unit in a relatively new building with the occupancy date after November 15, 2018, then you can increase your rent to any amount you like. And if the tenants don't like that increase, they can just leave and you will be able to release the unit at market price. Trust me, that sounds way easier than it practically is. But if your unit is in an older building with occupancy dates before November 15, 2018, then your unit is under rent control. And the maximum increase that you can do is a 2.5% for 2023. But still, that is nothing as compared to inflation out there. If you rented your unit at a discounted rate during the pandemic, now you are stuck with only a 2.5% increase. Of course, you want your tenant out so you can relist your unit at market rent. But the million-dollar question is, how can you do that legitimately? Let's find out. But first, you know the drill. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, tap that bell icon. It gets me motivated to keep you up to date with everything real estate. Now, according to the landlord and tenant support, there are only two legitimate reasons under which you can get a tenant out. Number one, you or your immediate family member needs to take the unit back for self-use. And in this case, you must pay 1 month's rent to the tenant as compensation. Reason number two, you have sold the unit to someone else and the new buyer now needs the unit for self-use. In this case, you don't need to pay any compensation to the tenant. Now, many landlords out there just take random advice from their friends or from the internet and from other people who think they know a lot. They simply kick the tenant out by saying that they need their unit back for self-use. Then they release the unit again at market rent without realizing that there are many consequences in doing so. So let me start by telling you a true story and stick to the very end. The verdict will shock you. So the seller listed his condo unit for sale with a tenant living in the unit. An interested buyer came in and said he wanted to purchase the unit for self-use. The buyer and the seller signed the purchase and sale agreement saying that the seller would be responsible for getting the proper notice out to the tenant so that the vacant unit would be given to the buyer for self-use. Remember that. The seller served an N12 to the tenant. And now if you don't know what an N12 is, I have done a whole bunch of videos on that, so go check that out. Anyways, coming back to the story, the tenant moves out and the buyer became the new owner of that particular unit. Everyone was happy, everyone moved on with their lives. A year later, the seller suddenly received a hearing notice from the Landlord-Tenant Board, because the tenant in that sold unit filed a claim against him. Approximately 6 months after the tenant moved out, he somehow discovered that the unit was rented out to a new tenant and the buyer did not actually move in. So he filed a claim against the seller for terminating the tenancy in bad faith. He wanted around $25,000 in compensation for his increased rent, moving expenses, the emotional damages. The tenant, the buyer, and the seller were all put in front of the hearing. The buyer defended himself, saying that his original intention was for his in-laws to move into the unit, but then they didn't like the place, so he rented it out instead. He also testified that his agent did not advise him properly of any of the consequences of all his actions. So basically, whose fault is it? And who should be paying the compensation to the tenant? Obviously the buyer, right? But no. It doesn't work that way. The case dragged on for I think 2 years. The seller was ordered to pay almost $10,000 to the tenant as compensation because he terminated the tenancy in bad faith. The seller was the landlord who had the lease agreement with the tenant, and the landlord was the one who served the notice to end the tenancy. Even though the buyer was the one who caused the actual damage, from the eyes of the landlord and tenancy board, it did not matter. The seller was the one who needed to be penalized. And this is absolutely ridiculous. Now, is there anything that the seller can do? Yes, he could. He could go and sue the buyer in the small claims court because it was written in the purchase and sale agreement that the buyer was going to be an end user. But typically what you should always ask for is the buyer to sign an affidavit declaring that he's going to be using it for himself. See, both the seller and the buyer's agent did not educate their client, otherwise they wouldn't be able to close the unit. Now, even though the seller was the one who was ordered to pay, the buyer had to put in the time, the effort, as well as paralegal fees for all the hearings, and the buyer may even face another court case should the seller decide to sue him for damages. So it is really a lose-lose situation for both the buyer and the seller. The buyer should have bought a vacant unit or assumed the existing tenant if he wanted the unit as a rental. This is a rare and unfortunate case, and we need to make sure both the seller and the buyer's agent are well educated to prevent this from happening. Now, if you are thinking of terminating your tenancy, make sure you're doing it legitimately. Rental is a vital part of your investment because it generates an income stream that keeps your investment running. It really needs to be handled with professional skills and absolute knowledge. So, if you have any questions or want clarifications, please don't hesitate to call me. And if you still don't know who I am, go check my rating on Google and read my client reviews. Till then, you take care. And if you found value or liked this video and would like to see more content, then please click on the boxes on the screen. Once again, my name is Preeti Rao. My contact information is in the description box below. Make sure to hit like, share, subscribe, and that bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to call me because I hold the key that opens the door to your dream home.